Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Richard Haight, and he's here today to share with us his new book, Unshakable Awareness, Meditation in the Heart of Chaos, taught by a master of 4 samurai arts. So, is it possible to stay present, clear-minded, and calm when facing unsettling times? Using forgotten principles of ancient practices, Richard Haight, master of 4 samurai arts and award-winning author, shares simple tips with us today on how to do just that. Many of you know Richard. He's been on the show before. He's best known for his book, The Unbound Soul, listed as one of the best books on consciousness of all time by Book Authority. He's also an instructor of martial arts, meditation, and healing arts, and is the author of several best-selling titles. So let's welcome to the show, Richard Haight.
Thank you for having me, Marianne.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. And I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Actually, it's the recent changes that have been going on in society, and just seeing how many people are stressed out. I mean, the suicide rate's up, and it's actually been very, very difficult even for meditators to remain aware or even to meditate in this circumstance. And so the meditation that I practice and teach is based off of samurai training. So therefore, one has to learn how to be calm and clear under extreme pressures. And although the first book I wrote on the warrior's meditation teaches people how to meditate while walking and while talking and just general daily life activities, it felt like there was really something much more, something needed to address the real intense pressures of life. And so that's where Unshakable Awareness came into existence.
Well, I noticed you did start this book off with talking about the economic changes that we're going through with COVID. And, I really feel that this book is more important now than ever to read, just with everything that's in it, how people can really take control of their lives in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's interesting because it's a lot of very small changes and small practices that we can do every day that make profound differences in our nervous system, in our perceptions, and our ability to remain calm and clear under pressure. It doesn't take a lot of time, but these are methods that it's not that the methods I'm conveying in the book are new. In fact, they're very, very ancient. It's just that they've sort of been lost or maybe we can say religified or ritualized such that people don't realize the value that was inherently there before the ritualization of these practices.
So how would someone use this book?
And so the book is actually written to be a practice guide. And so my general recommendation is people read and practice as they go. It's not a book about knowledge. Like if you're reading it to try and get knowledge, that's going to lead you, that intention would lead you astray. So the first step is to recognize that awareness and knowledge are not exactly the same thing. Most of us, when we think of awareness, we think of some kind of knowledge campaign, a sex trafficking awareness campaign or drug awareness campaign. And that sort of, we think of awareness in that way, but that's really just knowledge. And that knowledge is coming from a different place in the nervous system than what is awareness that I'm talking about. The awareness that I'm referring to is actually more like the basis of perception. It's at a more basic level of the nervous system than that which is contained in memory or knowledge. And so this book is really pointed towards getting back in touch with that fundamental awareness that is the human being. We human beings have been caught up in the human aspect, the knowledge aspect, the identity aspect, and we've sort of forgotten or lost touch with the being aspect. And so the book is designed to get us back in touch with the being aspect and to be able to remain in touch with that being aspect under pressure, still having access to the knowledge. I wonder if that answered the question.
It did. It did. And I'm glad that we're spending this time talking about your book because I think it's such a powerful book for people to use. You start off also talking about TEM training. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners that are new to your work what that is.
So TEM training it's based off of, again, samurai training, and it incorporates a number of practices that are designed to completely embody and express awareness throughout our daily life. And so it incorporates meditation as well as other types of, we could say, autonomic nervous system type training, autonomic movement, and it can potentially could be martial arts training, which is what I train in. I'm not currently teaching that now, but there are actually quite a few elements to it, of which I've only written about a few of those elements. But again, the point is not to turn the awareness practices or meditative practices into retreats from life, but instead to completely embody those practices such that we're forging forward in life through awareness, that the awareness becomes the vehicle through which we live our lives. And that's what really TEM is about.
I mean, how often do people meditate to really get away? It's kind of like escape life in many ways, you know? And I found it very powerful that this book really is encouraging people to embrace everything that shows up.
Yes. Many forms of meditation suggest that we do this, that is the right approach. It's just that they're just not that well tailored to actually allow it to come into our lives that way. If you have to sit and close your eyes or be in a secluded place and have a peaceful environment, if that's the prerequisite to meditate, then it's not going to lend well to daily life, which is full of activity, pressure, and stress, and that sort of thing. So TEM it begins with eyes open, and during our morning practice, I teach a daily 15-minute guided meditation, but I'll have people exercising or stretching or doing all kinds of things during the meditation so that they can actually bring it into their daily lives. And so that's the very beginning stage, begins with activity.
Oh my goodness, how important is that? Because, you know, when you think about meditating, I think a lot of times, and I've done this myself, where you're like, oh my goodness, I have that monkey mind going. I've got a billion things I've got to do. How do I have time to even meditate? And so incorporating these other like poses, yoga poses, and stretching, that must really be helpful.
Oh yes, and weightlifting and jogging in place and swimming and sprinting and talking after the morning class. We have what's called water jug chats where people can go in and just talk with each other. And that goal is to stay in meditation. You'd be surprised that talking in a meditative state is actually one of the more difficult things to do because our language is tied to our identity so strongly and is so personalized. So the practices are really designed to just really fill in all the gaps of our daily life where awareness is normally not there for us. We first need to show up for awareness, and then awareness starts to show up for us, right?
How profound is that? You know, and I think when you put it that way, it brings simplicity to a practice where people can get frustrated with, you know?
Yes. Oftentimes, there's a couple of issues that I found when I was a beginner in meditation. Was generally speaking, it's hard to find the time to meditate. And if you think it's going to take an hour or a half hour, if you're a busy person, even people that aren't busy can find ways not to meditate. But there's a justified reason not to do it if you are a busy person and you've got a lot on your plate, and the meditation is going to take some length of time. It actually, and you have to set aside that time. Then it actually makes sense that you might justifiably not meditate. And so TEM practices are designed to remove all the excuses because they can be done throughout your daily life. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it when you're in the restroom. You can do it while you're walking. You can even do it while you're talking. You can. It's hard to skip a day and not know that you're ducking out, right? And that's important.
Yeah, so you can really be present to what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, and I found that your book really went over quite a few things and as far as instructions that made it really simple for people to kind of look at things in a new way. You talk about the mind body restructuring. How does TM training kind of dovetail with that?
There's a couple of issues that human beings, well, it's not just human beings, but any animal has, and especially animals that live with human beings can take on this quality. So if we look at the brain as if, so most people think of the brain as just a thing that's in your skull, but it's actually the entire nervous system. But let's just say it's the entire central nervous system to be in alignment with modern science, but it actually should include the peripheral nervous system as well. But in any case, we'll say that the brain breaks up into 4 different developmental structures. And the most recent structure being the what do you call it? The cortex, or the that hat-like structure that's at the top of the brain. It's divided into 2 hemispheres, right? That's a newer structure. But the spinal cord would be the oldest structure. Then you've got the brain stem, and you've got the structures just around the brain stem. And then you've got this larger structure, and then the prefrontal cortex as well for human beings. It's a very new structure. But with these new structures, that's where our identity is found. That's where our memories are found. That's where our trauma is found. That's where our limitations are actually found. And it's also where we get caught up in the dream of self. And so it's actually resting into some of the older structures that allows for awareness to transcend our lives. And as we rest more into these older structures, some of this bound up identity and structures and assumptions and whatnot start to release. And as that starts to release, it actually restructures our neurological system. New neural pathways develop that allow for greater awareness in active daily life, that allow for acceptance and respect for the moment, and a resting in that capacity, even through intense activity. And so that's what I mean by like a neurological restructuring. But as that structuring takes place, so too does our environment start to change. We start to look at the space around us. We naturally want to correct some of the structures of our physical life, our relationships, so that it can allow for greater awareness and greater harmony. And the total restructuring is both internal and external.
You've done so much research for this. Was there anything that surprised you when you were doing that research?
A lot of it did, actually. And so when I first began this exploration with my teacher in Japan, it took an entirely different direction than, for example, Zen, which was a study that he had been practicing for years. It just took a very different structure, different direction than I had expected it to take in our martial arts training. And so what had happened is I'd had an insight as that we needed to combine martial training with meditative and what I would call healing art training. It's a kind of art that I studied in Japan called Sotaiho. He agreed with this as I became an advanced student. We collaborated our training. And so he taught me the martial arts. I taught him the healing art as well as the meditative arts that I had been practicing. And I didn't realize that there was really any scientific anything to support what we were doing. And I really didn't even know where we were going. And as the art progressed, as our abilities in all of these arts improved and sort of the form and training method developed, I came back to the United States. He gave me the lights. I came back to the United States, started teaching it, but I didn't realize that there was any information, any scientific evidence to support what we had discovered. And it wasn't until I wrote The Unbound Soul, and my editor, he was reading, he was editing, and he called me and says, a lot of what you're saying here is scientifically verified, surprisingly. And so he started sending me articles, and then that's when I began my research. And I was quite surprised to see how much is out there, but most of the research doesn't really, it's almost like people are researching in different areas of studies and not really communicating it all together. So it's not really seeing the big picture. And so that was a bit surprising for me.
Well, you're so good at putting all that information together so people can see the big picture. And when you look at the science of it, what are some of the things that you want the audience to really take away from this discussion?
The key thing to understand is the who you think you are is not actually true. It's a set of neurological patterns that are developed over the period of your life through your experiences and also the personality that you were born with, and that also then developed as you developed. But a lot of that content is habitual and has not really been looked at. And so it creates a lot of subconscious patterning. And that subconscious patterning doesn't just stop with your body, but it affects the environment around you, the type of job you would choose, the type of relationship that you might be in, the way, where you would live, the house, your friends, and all of that. But those structures, although they've created your life situation, they've also created most of your suffering, most of your negative habits. And you might find that when those structures change, who you think you were starts to become what I will describe as transparent. You start to see through those structures and realize, I'm really not my thoughts, I'm really not my emotions. What I am, I'm not truly sure, but awareness is the closest I can get to that, to understanding what it is. And there's a certain freedom that starts to occur. And it's there's a popular teaching now. It's like a self-confidence teaching that you should be confident and self-esteem and all of those things. When you rest in awareness, you realize those teachings don't mean anything, because that's just developing a new identity, a new trap. Many of the people that are highly self-confident actually have miserable lives, right? They're self-absorbed in themselves. They're self-absorbed fundamentally. It's not, when we're resting in awareness, we're able to do whatever is necessary without the thought, can I or can I not do this? Or am I worthy or am I not worthy? It's just a doing. There's just a seeing of a need and a fulfillment of that need. And it's not self-absorbed. In a sense, there's a kind of purity to it. And there isn't a feeling like, I did that. It's just something happened. It's a very strange experience that until one experiences it, it sounds very mystical and maybe sounds like fancy. But once one experiences it, then it starts to open up. It's like, Alice and just finds that hole and starts going. It just opens up a new realm of perception, a new realm of a new way of living. And it's quite refreshing.
It sounds very refreshing. And I think when you get to this point as well, that ego really starts to separate. I mean, the ego is good for some things, but it seems that that's not what's driving the bus.
Yeah, that's right. Early on, I mean, basically it is, that's all we got is ego to function in the world. And it's a necessary function. But at some point, it becomes less and less necessary. And some kind of inner inspiration starts to emerge that isn't really about ego. And that's the freeing element. Yeah.
It is. And your book really kind of outlines that. You talk about how if we understand how the brain changes, we can consciously, use those for self-improvement. And I think it gives people, like you're talking about, like a lot of freedom knowing, hey, I can be in control of making these changes that I want to see.
Yes, it's surprising the degree of control that we start to have and the degree to which our lives can change, and rapidly, as we start to gravitate toward awareness. So I'm using awareness almost as almost synonymously with meditation, but my view of meditation isn't really a form, but more like the awareness that emerges through a proper meditative practice. How you get to that awareness is pretty well irrelevant to me, in so much as that, as long as it's practical. If it's too overt, if it takes too much time, it would be impractical as a martial artist, and it would also be impractical for a person who would like to live their daily life in awareness. So other than the fact that it ought to be simple in order to be practical, I don't care which method you were to use. It's the awareness that is, to me, what really meditation is.
Yeah, I was really floored when I was reading your book. It talked about how, there are legends that talk about how the Buddha Dharma recommends martial arts and breathing training for improving your meditation practice. And it's interesting because I don't think people look at martial arts that way.
Yes, that's right. It's a very strange thing about the martial arts. We'll say that there's various levels to the martial arts, and the first few levels are really about strength, speed, and force, and maybe aggression and that sort of thing. But as you get more and more advanced, and especially as your body starts to age, all of those things fail. And if you're going to continue to improve, you have to find another way, a better way. And that leads one into awareness. And so as one starts to gravitate toward awareness, a strange thing occurs. Your body coordinates better. You're able to move more efficiently. You're able to perceive what the opponent is intending to do toward you. And therefore, you don't need the speed like you needed before. And since your body coordinates, you don't need the strength. Your entire body weight and movement is behind your strikes or whatever your movements are. And it's actually just it's essentially a meditation that's become active or moving. It's a beautiful thing, but it changes the arts entirely. Very few individuals get to that level, largely because they probably don't know that it's possible. And there are very few examples of that in the world these days. I was fortunate to have met several just great examples of that when I went to Japan, and older men that you would never think would stand a chance. I was well trained, and I wanted to be a professional fighter, and I got run over by a horse, so that was not possible. But when I went to Japan, I wasn't going easy on these people. I wanted to see if they can really, wanted to meet someone who could defeat me easily. And the first person that I met that was a 72-year-old man. How was that possible? And he didn't do it with speed and strength and power. It was altogether quite mysterious, but awareness was at the core of it.
Oh, it sounds like
So
such a perfect meeting.
Can lead to, yes. Oh, it was amazing. And so the martial art path, if practiced in the right way, can lead to profound meditation and awareness and life transformation. It's just that's rarely exemplified, but it's possible.
Well, it seems that people should inquire about that when they're doing martial art training to get to those different levels of awareness too, because it sounds like that is just part of that training that maybe for whatever reason isn't really being pursued here as much as it should.
One of the interesting things, one of the blockages I found was that anger or malice, the desire to harm your opponent, is a complete blockage to awareness. And so if in the martial arts training, if you're practicing with the intention to harm the other person, that's a blockage to awareness. That's going to be your limitation. And so you have to find another way. And the art of jujitsu, soft art, and like Tai Chi Chuan, or things, some of the older martial arts, I'm sure back in the 2,000 years ago, whenever they began, many of these arts founders recognize this point, which is why those arts are they stress the harmony of training and the harmony of intention in the training. So that's kind of built into the system, at least in the lore. I suspect that was exemplified in those martial artists back in those days. Some of it's been lost now. Maybe it's just almost legendary, but not necessarily exemplified. But if we inquire and if we practice with the intention of finding a harmonious resolution to a situation without running away from it, then that provides an avenue towards awareness.
Well, it seems that if we're looking for harmonious situations to occur, that really is asking a lot of us, and it is putting that anger, that frustration, whatever that is, aside, and to really do some inner work to get to that place where we can show up and walk in awareness.
Yes, that's exactly right. In fact, you can see right now in the world, probably now more than it has been the case for a long time, rage and anger and frustration and malice and those things are kind of really coming up as society is under more and more pressure. So this is, in a sense, an opportunity to transcend those things because they are expressing through us, and when they express, it's an opportunity to see them. If we think of those things as a virtue, if we stoke them, then we're lost. Repressing them doesn't help either. It's awareness that's the answer. As we become more and more aware, those energies, those built-up energies of frustration and rage and anger, resentment, and those sort of things start to fade away. And we realize that we are the answer we've been seeking. It's not out there. It's not necessarily in politics, or it's not in what other people think or whatnot. It's really within you. and you become the center of your perceptual universe. If your body and mind are in harmony, the rest gets a lot easier. That's your first instrument in the world. It's the body and mind complex. And so if you're going to be a musician, your instrument should be good. If you're going to be human, the instrument should be good, harmonious. It's at the core of every experience you can have, in inner experience or external experience.
Well, you touched on something that I would love for you to unpack here a little bit. So you talk about harmonious relationships and just being in harmony. You have several chapters in your book that all are about sound. Why is that, and why is that so important?
The sound that I teach are what I would describe as primary sound. So we'll divide sounds up into two basic categories, primary and what I'll say is secondary sounds. In the ancient times, they would have considered them sacred. Primary sounds would have been considered sacred sounds or spiritual sounds or those sort of things. So these sounds that I'm talking about as primary sounds are sounds that can be maintained or sustained over an entire breath. They're essentially long vibrations. You could think of almost like chanting and that sort of thing. Now, within a chant, there will be a consonant followed by a vowel sound. That the vowel sound can be elongated. A consonant cannot be elongated. And so those primary sounds, as they're elongated, create a vagal response. The vagus nerve is a nerve that runs from the brainstem and down to the visceral organs. It affects your immune system. It affects your brain waves. It affects really your entire bodily health system. And uttering those primary sounds in the proper way creates a vagal nerve response that allows the body to shift into a deeper state of awareness. This is why the chants make use of those sounds. Now, of course, the chants, the mantras, and that sort of thing have been ritualized and become religious tools, and oftentimes absent the understanding of why they work. But one of the reasons why they work is just the fact that those sounds, the vagus nerve travels through the ears and also is affected by the voice. And so we can actually shift the body into a powerful state of awareness through the voice, through those chants. Now, of course, in the book, Unshakable Awareness, I'm using those sounds, those primary sounds, to help people make a shift into awareness, but also as a way of measuring their progress under pressure. And so that's where the pressure training comes in, and it becomes a measuring tool so they can see how well they're able to do when under pressure. So
with those, and I'm so glad you explained that, because a lot of people don't even realize that when they're making those vowel sounds, why that has any importance. When you hear the Buddhist monks Om or anything like that, it really makes sense when that all comes together.
Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, the Buddhist monks may themselves not know the mechanism behind it, but they're feeling it. That's the key point. Whether they knew that scientifically there's some verification for why it works, the key point is that if they're going to make progress, they're feeling it. Gregorian monks do similarly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, my instructor and I were practicing these sounds in Japan, not knowing the scientific relevance to it. We were just seeing how it affected our movement. So we would test every form of meditation, every form of vagal stimulation. We didn't know what it was called, what that was at the time, but for example, these primary sounds, and then test our movement. And when the body's in harmony and coordinated, essentially when we're in an alpha, theta, or delta, possibly gamma brainwave state, the body coordinates and allows movements that would otherwise seem impossible. If we're in the thinking beta brain stressed mind, we simply we can't pass these movement tests. So we were actually just testing everything with movements to find out what was powerfully effective and what was not. Some of the ancient practices didn't really work out. Some of them worked out tremendously well. And you could prune away we'll say the religious elements and the ritualized elements and get down to the real core of what the practice actually was. See, these tools were not actually originally religious or spiritual practices per se, so much as they were survival mechanisms, survival tools. and work best in that situation. Because in a survival situation, as well as a martial arts situation, what you do has to be effective, or you die.
That has to be just real important when you put it that way. You look at this and you're like, wow, okay, I get this. But to feel that resonance within you and being able to really kind of feel what works and what's kind of maybe doesn't quite come together. I mean, how important is that? Because, you get people at different walks of life, and maybe they're like, well, I'm doing this, but I can't quite feel. And you've kind of really cracked that code for them.
Mm-hmm. It becomes very, very simple. And the only reason I came to this awareness is that I reached an advanced level in the martial art where I was stuck. I couldn't progress. And so I had to find that mysterious element that allowed certain people to progress that I hadn't quite found yet. And so that was where my research kicked in. And once I started to realize what was happening in my body at a nervous system level, things just rapidly, went through the ranks and achieved those highest rankings. So if you could start your martial arts training there, wow, that'd be a great advantage. But we found that it's also worked for playing music. My teacher was a musician, and he taught the Japanese flute, and he would play it not in that awareness state, and then he would play in an awareness state, and there was an obvious difference. It affects anything we do in a beneficial way.
Well, and for people who are wanting to kind of understand a little bit more of what that sounds like, I understand for those people who purchase a book, there's a way that they can also download the primary sounds that you have listed in the book. Yeah.
Yes. And that's just the beginning of the book. And then after that, we take them through a number of we'll say, pressure training tools that are available in their home. And the key point for this, since the book was written essentially for the lockdown situation, all the practices needed to be done readily in your home. And so everything that's taught in that book, you don't have to go out for it. You don't have to buy anything for it. It's all been there. The question is, are you going to make use of it or not? And it removes the excuses. Right. And
you can do it all there, right?
It's all there. It's all there. And the great thing is, if you think about anything that you've really improved at and that you've really gotten good at, you find that something that you learn or something that lasts in your life, something that you remember forever, the intensity of the moment where you experienced it determined how deeply it was ingrained in the nervous system. This is one of the reasons why we have trouble forgetting traumas, right? Because they're so intense. And so if you can create a meditative experience that is equally intense as those intense traumas or whatever, it's equally transformative as those traumas could be limiting. And so this training method is designed to create a real intensity with the meditation so that your brain realizes that it's important. So the brain changes, as we discussed earlier in this interview, the brain changes really every day. Neuroplasticity, what's happening is the brain is essentially kind of almost a fluid type organ. It's the only organ that's changing according to your environment, and the changes are so that you can adapt to your environment. The changes actually occur at night when you're sleeping. During the day, that's the opportunity to program or tell your brain what changes you would like to incorporate. Now, normally we're not aware of this, so we just kind of, sort of bumble through our day unconsciously, and oftentimes just reliving the same old pattern. And so our brain just keeps reinforcing that same old pattern. But once we become aware of the fact that the brain is changing according to how we're programming it, which means the types of activities, the types of thinking, the types of the attitudes that we carry throughout our day, we can start to make important shifts in those activities, attitudes, behaviors, and that sort of thing, so that the brain can adjust and make what we want easier and easier to come by or to be experienced. But we can further amplify that change by making the experiences of our day that much more intense. And that's what Unshakable Awareness is really aimed to convey.
And you do it so well, let me tell you. So I love how you weave that all together, because it makes sense, even for lay people who are like getting into the science of it. It's like, okay, how does this all come together? And how does this make it, lead me on a path of being, an aware person. And what does that really mean? And you really have it layered so that people can understand why, and then start using these practices at home.
Yes, yes. Well, there's a lot more to it. And that book is designed to be as streamlined as possible, so that people get the experience and they don't have the excuses not to do it. If you add too much, it ends up almost becoming overwhelming. So I had to actually remove about half the content of the book that was originally there. But right now it's so streamlined that it's very effective to get people the experience, so that once they have these experiences, a powerful seed is planted, and it's difficult for them to just sort of forget the potential that's actually there. And so they're going to find most of the rest of it on their own if they're interested.
I'm sure you have people lining up for that. So, yeah. Well, I have to ask you, in your book, you also talk about the purification by water. Why was that so important to include in this book?
So in ancient times, we did not have heated water. I mean, if you're taking a bath, cleanliness is important so that you don't get bacterial infections and that sort of thing. So this is an unexpected thing. One of the issues that let's say the Europeans had is because they were a farming society and they lived indoors, and a lot of them had some sort of heating indoors, or they could heat their baths and that sort of thing. When they were out in the wilderness, they wouldn't take baths. And so when they met the Native Americans sort of like, boy, you guys are really dirty. They were almost put off by it. Because for the Native Americans, washing is just a daily thing, and you don't do it in heated water. You walk out into the river, right? If it's in the wintertime, you punch a hole in the ice and you do it that way. But nowadays, we think that would kill you. And it would if your body's really weak, which it is. But if that was how you live your life, that's just normal, and it's not difficult. And so what's happened is that our bodies have gotten so weak that we need to warm our water all the time. And so that doesn't exercise our nervous system sufficiently. It doesn't exercise our vascular system, arterial system. It doesn't exercise the cells, mitochondria. And so that not only does it make for a weak body, but it makes for a lot of emotional reactivity that would otherwise not be there. And so purification by water originally began, if you look at the Jewish ceremonies, for example, the Japanese ceremonies as well, where they would intentionally go into natural bodies of water to purify themselves before ceremonies, after touching a corpse, or, if they were under some incredible emotional issue or having psychological problems, that sort of thing. The Japanese would walk under waterfalls and pray for purification, to release negative energies and that sort of thing. That sounds ridiculous when you hear about it. I mean, negative spirits and demons and all that sort of thing, exorcisms and stuff by water. That's what they meant. But if you think about it, back in those days, they didn't have science. They didn't know what emotions were. And to them, the true you was the thing that was stable, that was not reactive. It was awareness. And so a possession was when you were out of control, which is how often are we out of control? We're having a intense argument with our husband or wife, or, resentment, anger, envy, guilt, shame, blame, all that stuff. Those would be considered demonic or negative spirits to the ancients, because they didn't have a better way of explaining it. It was as if you were possessed. And why would they think that you were possessed? Because, well, clearly you're not aware at that time. You're not in control. You can't stop yourself from saying that mean thing that you ought not say, but you say it anyway. So they viewed it as if it was a possession. And what they found is if they just went into, that cold ice waterfall, suddenly all those emotional negative energies were gone. And that was like an exorcism for them, right? Well, that's still possible now, right? And so that's why that activity was incorporated. And it quite literally is, in experience, the feeling of being purified. Now, the intention is important. You have to actually intend, you're intentionally going into the water to let go of that negativity. But it doesn't take any kind of mysticism to do that. It doesn't take any religious belief to do that. All you have to do is intend to release those negative emotions and step into that cold water. And the rest it just happens on its own.
What if somebody's not used to cold water? How would you suggest they start doing that?
Start just getting your feet into that cold water. Maybe fill up the bath a little bit with some cold water and step into it. Or take the cold shower head and start to run it up your legs, that sort of thing. Over a short period of time, your body will start to acclimate. You can run cold water over your head in the mornings, that sort of thing. But do it every day, and your body rapidly starts to adjust to it. And the strange thing is, after about a month or so, some people, if they take it seriously, they do it every day, they start to enjoy the cold showers much more than the warm showers. And in fact, the warm showers start to feel almost like not healthy. It's a strange thing how often I receive it. I don't like warm showers anymore. I feel like they're not healthy for my body. When I get in, my body doesn't feel better after. It feels like it's heavier, right? Like it's heavier. But when you take those cold showers, you feel just crisp and enlivened and energized. Your days go better. Now, of course, the intention for these showers is very, very important. The state, the brainwave state that we're in when we enter into the shower and that we seek to maintain while in the shower is very, very important as well. So it's learning to actually meditate under that pressure of cold water. And then, of course, later on in the book, other pressures as well. And we find that if we can do it under pressure, then, meditating is easy. Awareness is easy. And we start to really be able to see the elements within our lives that have been holding us back. And it's not because we learned some new philosophy. It's just from a simple daily practice.
Well, how empowering is that? You can use these tools to go ahead and have a better experience. And, I love how you are encouraging people to work through what's going on throughout their day, because life is going to happen and we should always be able to manage our meditation within the life that happens.
Yes, at least the intention to gravitate toward greater acceptance of what's occurring in the moment. And acceptance doesn't mean like just, what I mean by acceptance, I mean it's like in boxing, you'd say rolling with punches. So, for example, if you're getting punched and you have a negative attitude toward getting punched, it actually makes the punches hurt more. It makes it difficult to adapt and turn the situation in a positive direction. Whereas if you just shift your mind towards, it's okay, I get punched, but I'm going to roll with it and turn it into a positive situation. Life is like that. It's like the punches are coming. Your attitude toward it determines what happens in that instant, how much it impacts you, and also how smoothly you're able to flow through it. And if we're not able to touch in with awareness, we're very limited in our capacity to flow with the moment. We can't do it with thinking. Thinking doesn't get us there. It's too slow. If I'm thinking in front of my martial arts instructor, I'm dead. His movement is so smooth that his sword would cut me before I even knew it was coming. It can't come from thought. And daily life starts to become more and more about this vibrant awareness. It's a relaxed, vibrant awareness.
That's so fundamentally important, and it's so important to know this. When we look at people being able to measure their progress, how can they do that, and what does that look like?
So we use the primary sounds, for example, and what you'll find is like, if, for example, you're taking a nice cold bath or the ice showers or whatever, you'll find that you can't actually verbalize, you can't chant. Your lungs are spasming, right? You can't. Now some of the sounds are easier to do, and some of them are more difficult. So we have it layered out as you progress. You work with this sound, and then at some point that becomes easy. So then you try the next sound, and at some point that becomes easy. You try the next sound, and you just realize over a period of weeks how when you first began, you might have tried all the sounds and you couldn't produce any of them in that cold water situation. But at the end of it, after 1 month or so, you could produce all of them with ease. Something profound has changed in your body. And you also know that you're able to stay in a meditative awareness in a shower, whereas before that, you couldn't meditate even while you were sitting in ideal situations in many cases, right? That's a profound change. And then it's a lot easier, when your wife or husband or partner is being cantankerous, to stay in awareness, or when things aren't going right at work, or you become less concerned about, are you worthy? That's a question that everybody has in the back of their mind all the time. We're trying to prove our worth in some way or another. Some of us through competition, some of us through sympathy or feeling victimized or whatever. And all of that is fundamentally the same issue. We're trying to prove our value or our worth. Awareness doesn't do that. So the ego plays that game. Awareness does not. And as we settle more, gravitate more toward awareness, less and less of that kind of mental noise is a part of our life experience. And then we're not concerned about opinions, other people's opinions of us, or our own opinion of us. It's just more opinions. It doesn't mean anything. And there's an inner peace, yet with the capacity to improve in every moment. See, normally if a person says, I don't care what people think about me, what they're saying is, I'm locked in my way and I just don't give a turd what you think, right? It's not awareness. That's just stubbornness, right? But when awareness is at the fore, opinions of our value mean nothing, because we're not caught up in identity. But at the same time, we're able to very easily move toward improvement. Not for the sake of feeling worthy, but just because it feels right. Right. I wonder if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and in being able to train and retrain the brain this way, is this something that could take people, a long time? Maybe that's probably some hesitancy why people go, I don't know if I could do it. It's too much work, but it's almost too much work not to do it, right?
Oh, yeah. Not doing it is, not doing it will guarantee you're not going to get anywhere. So what happens is people, when they do this practice, they find that they get a tremendous benefit. I mean, really right away, like on the first day, usually people notice their day is so much better than it would have otherwise been. And so it's not hard to see the improvements at all. But there's no limit to how much we can improve. So it's like the martial arts. There is not actually an upper limit. When I got my 10th degree black belt, or what's called the Menkyo Kaiden in Japanese, it's not like I stopped growing and improving in the art. It's just, I just learned the entire curriculum. It's like getting your, master's or PhD and whatever, to be a doctor or whatever. It doesn't mean you stop improving at that point. That's the beginning, right? That's the beginning. 10th degree black belt is the beginning. And wherever you are, no matter how good you are, quote unquote, or how effective you are, whatever, that moment, that's the beginning. That's your step one. There's no limit. Better to think that way, right?
Oh my goodness. Well, and I think it's encouraging when people hear that, because it's not like it's not a race, it's a journey. So,
it's a journey, and it's so fun too. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get to enjoy it. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, especially in today's climate, we've got a lot of people who may not really be enjoying their journey.
Oh yes. This is the fundamental disease. You see, this wasn't this mindset that we have that's sort of plaguing the world now. Is life is so serious. We beat curiosity out of children when they're young. And that leads to a very heavy heart, a hard heart. And it takes away from awareness. And so really this process is almost a return to innocence, yet still with the ability to make use of knowledge. It's not like you become stupid or foolish. You actually become more functional. But there's this openness and a willingness to take risks because it's a joy. It's exciting or fun or interesting. And it's hard to be bored. It's hard to be bored when practicing this way, because your body, most people don't know this, But you can feel your pulse everywhere in your body simultaneously. I do, and anybody can. There's so many, the inner body is absolutely fascinating. But that information is not accessible to most people because there's only so much data that can make its way into your waking window of perception. And what makes its way into your waking window of perception is determined by what you valued, what you explore every day. And if it's just, data sheets and how much money you're making and, what people think of you and, the stresses of life and all of that, well, that's what you're going to see. But if you start paying attention to the inner body, a whole new realm opens up, and it's really fascinating. You start to see into the subconscious mind. You start to see the causes and motivations for what's actually happening in your life, many of which were not at all what you might have assumed they are. There's the assumed motivation for why you're doing what you're doing, and then there's the actual motivation, which is much deeper in the nervous system. And it's a beautiful experience to explore, and you start to realize that who you think you are is pretty far off the mark. And it becomes a journey of discovery, not of who you are, not even of what you are, but of being. It's not a who, it's beyond identity. It's really beautiful. It sounds so mystical. I know it sounds really woo-woo to anybody who's not, but it's very simple, and it just allows for a joyous life. And it's not like you become great in your mind, or it's actually a simplification. I love the Tao Te Ching, which is a Chinese classic book attributed to the author Lao Tzu, who describes that the master is as simple as a stone. And that makes sense when you gravitate toward awareness, because you're not trying to do something to be seen as great by yourself or anybody else. It's a joy.
I love that. Because it really does put things in more simplistic terms. And I think people really can then appreciate, getting into a deeper sense of awareness about themselves and their journey without having, again, like the ego taking over, like, hey, look how great I am or how much I've accomplished. It's just their own personal journey, their own personal goal. Maybe goals are a little bit too hard, but maybe their personal journey for a level of awareness that they're wishing to obtain for themselves.
Yeah. And the surprising thing about it is it's not like you become some sort of, they would say, the typical stereotypical thing is you become some hippie who doesn't have any goals or doesn't have any aims and doesn't take any response. It's not that, because that's also an avoidance of life. But the goals and aims become inspiring, challenging, fun. And you start to take on maybe larger and larger responsibilities because you're not avoiding things anymore. It actually is, it's a surprising element of balance between, it's like you're doing things that normally in the past you would not have wanted to do, but now you're doing them in a way that's joyous and fun. And by doing so, you're removing a tremendous psychic burden. You see that backlist of promises and things that you need to do or should do that you've not gotten to. Those keep just creeping into your mind, and those are seeds of disharmony, seeds of discontent, seeds of self-contempt and judgment and resentment and everything else, shame and guilt. And so you start to take care of all of that, but in a way it's done through awareness, not through obligation. It's a different universe. It can't be described as duty or obligation. And then the heart becomes lighter and lighter because you don't have that psychic debt anymore. You're clear. I don't write out of obligation. I don't do things out of obligation. It's just a lot of people think if you become aware in this way, you won't do anything anymore. That's just not true. Yeah. You might actually find that you do more things. It's just that you do them in awareness. There's a stillness within the activity.
People can still have kids and lives and jobs and, have awareness. Imagine that,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. I mean, 2,000 years ago, people needed to, maybe retreat to caves and that sort of thing in order to achieve this awareness. But that's not where we are now as human beings. Maybe something's happened. We're able to do it without having to retreat. We're in the next phase of human development. And Retreat is not necessary anymore. Move through awareness. And it's not as difficult as, I guess when I first started, I thought this was going to be super difficult. And it took a long time to figure out how to do it. I started this process when I was about 16. Actually, I guess I started it when I was 12, but I didn't really consciously, intentionally do it until I was 16. And then I didn't start teaching it till, 7 years ago or so. All that time was an exploration to find, is this possible? How do I bring awareness, this meditative capacity, into the martial arts and then into daily life? And then how do I teach it? And so it's 30 odd years of experience it took for one person to come up with what we have now. And then I have people that have been practicing for a couple of months, and they're just cutting decades of time off of, that took me decades to get to in just a few months. And so that it's there now, and, people could take advantage of it and should.
Well, without a doubt. My goodness. Your book I found to be so impactful. We were talking. I've bought most of the collection and I'm working on the rest. And so I think it's something that everyone should dive into, for their own personal journey. And so, Richard, I know you talk about in your book, like reminders, what's an example of a reminder a person have that they can use on a daily basis, just kind of get their meditation practice a little bit more life in control.
So, of course, the reminder should be personalized. But for example, one that I used to use, when I was in Japan, I was a middle school teacher. So I would use a clock. I had to constantly be monitoring the clock to sort of pace my lessons. You have to get through so much material each lesson and for each class. So I made a rule that every time I looked at the clock, every time I checked the time, I would take a second to calm and be aware and be mindful of that. So those little tiny things like that, setting triggers like that and empowering those triggers such that they will actually remind you to do that thing that you intend to do, is extremely powerful. One of the reasons why people tend not to progress in meditation, aside from the fact that they may not have time to do a traditional form of it, is they just forget to do it. And so setting up triggers is vital to stimulating your brain to restructure at night. Because if you forget to do it, like the worst thing you can do is simply not practice whatever it is you intend to practice each day. If you do it a little every day, your brain will reinforce it and you can make rapid progress. It'd be better to practice 15 minutes a day than to skip a couple of days and do an hour once a week. You'll get far further with 15 minutes a day.
That's so impressive, because that makes such a huge difference on how we look at our journey and how we're rewiring our brain in order to have it work for us as we work towards our own personal awareness. Richard, my goodness, we could talk for hours. Where can our listeners connect with you and learn about all of your books and more about Unshakable Awareness?
Yeah, the best place would be richardlhaight.com. It's H-A-I, spelled like Haight Ashbury, richardlhaight.com. And there you can find the books as well as several courses that I offer. The daily meditation is a great place to start. It's both live and on demand. I teach at 7 p.m. Pacific time every morning. We meet live on Zoom. We have thousands of practitioners, most of whom will practice the on-demand video. The on-demand's up for 24 hours a day. Then it's gone. So if you missed the lesson, you missed it. It's like when I went to the dojo. If I skipped going to the dojo, my teacher may have shown something that he might never show again. And so I didn't miss days. For the entire time I was in Japan, I showed up. And so that's a great course that people gain a lot of benefit from, and I highly recommend that they join that. If they would like, I give a free month trial with the purchase of the Warrior's Meditation, or that's one of my books that teaches this method, as well as is Unshakable Awareness. So you can find those books on Amazon or any online book vendor.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. It was a real pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank you, Richard. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, Unshakable Awareness. Unshakable Awareness is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Again, if you'd like to connect with Richard, you can at richardhaight.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.